At work this week, I did plan to make a Life on the Rails video about this picture that I took 20 years ago, this picture that my friend took and posted a couple of weeks ago, the similarities of which are obvious. What isn't so obvious though is what happened at work last night made it almost full circle, because my picture involved being wet and getting to bed late, and events last night also happened to be getting wet and being late to bed, but for two very different reasons. Last night started at Fern Park, where we then headed off to King's Cross to get water to fill up the tanks on the underneath of the train. However, Naz, being a bit overzealous with the tap, turned it on a bit too much, and the pipe flew off the hose connector and soaked, well, at least one individual. Did I laugh? Of course I did. That was the getting wet part. Now the rest of the evening I was late to bed because, well, just because it's a long job.
Yeah, that's the kiddie.
After filling up with water, it was off to Hornsey to reverse, and then for our first visit to Liverpool Street. Platform 13 for the first one. And then it was off to Enfield Town because Enfield Town instead of Cheshunt because of an emergency speed restriction. I meant to say emergency possession, but you know, once we turned around at Enfield Town, it was back to Liverpool Street, this time platform 7.
So I'm going to try and blog tonight's events or tonight's job, and then I'll tell you about the story that happened 20 years ago after. We're now at Ingatestone Loop on my break. I'm having a cup of tea. It's the middle of the night and there's a Freightliner train just about to go past. He'd just come off the North London line as we was passing Stratford, and he's been right up my tail light ever since. What's it like working nights, driving trains? It depends what it is, really. Years ago, when I was a bit younger, I really enjoyed herring up and down the West Coast Main Line, towing container trains at 75 miles an hour. I found it really easy. Today, I'm a little bit older and the trains are slower and the shifts are longer. So 25th of October 1998 to Sunday. We used to go down in pairs from Crewe to Wembley and then work back. But I think, according to my diary on this particular day, I'd been called in early to take a light engine. 9136. It didn't seem to be any different sort of a day, except it was raining. So after getting to Wembley, hooked onto my train, 14 twin sets Arbels. So that's equal to 28 wagons. Not much trailing weight, only 1181 tonne. But with a Class 90 in the rain, in the Leafs fall season, Sunday night, Monday morning, when there's not been very much about, the rails were slippery. Now my colleague who'd gone down before me, we should have gone down together, but I'd gone light engine, he'd set off before me and he was in trouble. And it didn't dawn on me until I went past him how much of in trouble he was, because he'd set off with one engine and ended up with two. It wasn't so long after that I got into trouble. Wheel spinning, just no traction whatsoever. So I'd gone through Milton Keynes, was about to cross over onto the Northampton lines, and I was crawling along. And I'd stopped at a signal, and the signal box asked if I asked if there was anything about that could push me along a little bit. And the only thing that was about was my colleague, who refused to push me. I did everything that I could. There's a few tricks you can pull with a Class 90 electronic switch that sort of resets everything, and I did that, but there's still no joy. I still couldn't get any traction, still slipping around. Anyway, there's a little bit of a hill just as before the birdcage, I can't remember what it's called, just before you go down towards Northampton, and I got just over that little bit of a hill and then literally fell down the bank into Northampton, where I was put on the goods line and told to stay put. Control decreed that I wasn't to go or try to get up the bank on my own unassisted, so I had to wait for an engine to come from Rugby. That engine duly arrived in the shape of 37211. I hooked the engine on, did a brake test, and then proceeded up the bank towards Rugby. I thought it would be beneficial to help him along a bit, and I think we managed to get up to got quite a lick on. And because I wasn't driving, I thought it would prime opportunity to take a picture. So from Northampton to Rugby is uphill, and I was towed and pushed the 37 up the hill. We got to Rugby, hooked off, and then I was allowed to go on my merry way a couple of hours late into Crewe. On that job we'd normally get to Crewe, I think probably about 6 o'clock. I'd be home for 7. This day I was into Crewe for 8, and it was nearly 9 o'clock by the time I got home. Very late to bed. So we're at St Botolph's now, or Colchester Town. Let's go to the seaside. I often get asked if I've got a favourite engine, and the answer to that is not really. They're all pretty much the same, with a few exceptions. I mean, this one's my favourite because it's blue. Then it's not my favourite because it's got a DRS cab. It's quite loud. I like 057 because it's not orange and yellow. Not 057 because it's green. I quite like driving from the DBSO because it's normally quiet, apart from this one, which is the noisiest one in the fleet. Check the lights before we go. Where are we? Walton-on-the-Naze. It's one of the exotic places on my route card that I don't get to go very often, but I really like coming here. But then when I get here, it's I'm always disappointed because it's a really rubbish photo. So we're always talking about engines. So my favourite engine is 37099 because it's got black boxes and it's an old Eastern Region engine. But then it's not my favourite because it's probably the most temperamental engine that we've got in the fleet. 219 is my favourite because no, it isn't. 175 because it's loud. Not 175 because it's an old Welsh engine. What else have we got? The 150 unit, the TRU. Really like that because it's a nice thing. It's probably the easiest thing that we've got to drive. Then again, it's not my favourite because it's not an engine. The HST or the NMT? No. I'll let Joe tell that story. That's really easy to drive as well. I quite like that. It goes really fast as well, you know. That's a funny story as well. I must tell that one day. back to Colchester. Colchester town again. It's 5 to 5, 5 to 6 in the morning. I've got about 10 or 15 minutes work to do. Then it's bedtime. Now that that's been put to bed, it's time I got in one as well. So this is my home for the next 2 days. But I'm sorry, you can't come in. I'll speak to you soon.